Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 45th week Saturday episode of the Free Assange Vigil. Today is day 3,448 since the illegal and arbitrary detention of Julian Assange has started. It is day 401 since he was trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy and into Belmarsh prison following the $4.2 billion International Monetary Loan Fund to the nation of Ecuador. It is 114 days until the start of the second round of Julian's extradition hearing. It is 1,078 days since the detention of Reality Winner started in federal custody. And in happy news, it is day 64 since Chelsea Manning was released from the Eastern District of Virginia and the 10-year-long grand jury against WikiLeaks has ended. So I would like to thank everybody for joining us today, and we have two extremely special guests with us. We have Ian Rose joining us for a late night episode with him out in Australia, and Tariq Haddad, author, independent journalist, and founder of Watchdog. How are you guys doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. So just to start out, we had a World Press Freedom Day event that happened probably about 2 weeks ago now or so. And you guys out in Australia actually kicked it off, Ian. So I wanted to open the floor up to you to talk a little bit about the work of Sork Sydney and how you guys celebrated World Press Freedom Day.
Well, we had a 1 hour long sort of forum with a couple of exceptional guests, actually. It was James Ricketson, who's a journalist and filmmaker who was locked up in Cambodia on charges of espionage. And the Australian government really worked hard to get him released. They had head of state meetings. They did all the things that they're not doing for Julian Assange. So he was released within 15 months. We also had Mary Kostakidis speaking, and she's quite a seasoned journalist and was instrumental in setting up what's called the SBS network, which is unique in the world because it has programs in about 160 languages, depending on which hour you're tuning into. And we also had a journalist by the name of Paul Gregoire, who writes for an organization called Sydney Criminal Lawyers. And he's a younger man, but he is often what he writes about will be picked up by the mainstream media in the next few days after he's written an article. So they talked about the importance of press freedom. They talked about the importance of Julian Assange, and they talked about the importance of WikiLeaks, and really how we're all really rather stifled by the fact that our media editors and publishers, owners, really restrict what journalists can say about Julian Assange. You know, it got to the point, this is back in about 2011, where a seasoned political reporter by the name of Laurie Oakes on our mainstream television was accepting a Walkley Award. And while he was which is sort of like Australia's preeminent journalists award, while he was accepting that award, he spoke about Julian Assange and the importance of WikiLeaks and the fact that he could not get any stories published on one of our major networks, the Channel 9 network. And he used that opportunity to do it there. And nothing really has changed in the last 9 years since then.
So, Tariq, you had a actually pretty similar experience to the one that Ian was outlining when the OPCW leaks came out, and it was revealed to the world that the OPCW, at best, omitted a lot of information and at worst altered the reports that came out about the gas attacks in Duma. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that perspective of journalists not being able to cover Julian and the work of WikiLeaks in the mainstream.
Sure, I think it must vary from place to place, and I think I talked about this with Steve quite recently. But I think it's more of it's almost like an unsaid thing. You know, there's no one going around telling journalists not to write on Julian Assange. I think it's more of like a groupthink mentality where, it's kind of to survive in that industry for a certain period of time, it's like you have to go along with the groupthink of that group. As you know, as soon as you you start to deviate, you kind of find yourself falling out of favor with your editors, and people will start making your job more difficult for you, and they'll kind of will do all those kind of things. So I think it's never really like an explicit, you can't do this, but just kind of that kind of pressure.
Because in response, when you had left Newsweek, you actually started an organization that I find to be amazing, which is the Watchdog. And we got to partner together for the first round of Julian's extradition hearings. So could you talk a little bit about what the Watchdog is and kind of how it came to be and where you see it going in the future?
Sure. So right now it's kind of still very basic. It's still just a website, but it kind of came about, the same time that I resigned from Newsweek. I kind of, had my kind of world was thrown upside down, but my kind of biggest priority was Julian Assange at the time. It was kind of, didn't really care what was happening too much personally. I just thought that, we need kind of critical press coverage at the hearings and coverage that's going to sort of, write the stories that come out of court in a way that's actually fair to Julian and to WikiLeaks. Because, as and you guys have probably discussed this countless times with, how the media has portrayed Julian, and we know the countless examples of, smears and fake stories that have been written in the media. So it was just kind of one of those situations where I felt like, I kind of wanted to throw it together as quickly as possible, just to kind of make sure that, good news reports were coming out of court. And then kind of since then, I've been trying to build it in a way that kind of avoids the pitfalls that many other organizations kind of have, be they mainstream or alternative. I think kind of having been around the media for the last sort of 10 years or so, you kind of see certain patterns that you see with, Democracy Now! Or Intercept or so, whatever. There's, you notice certain trends of why organizations start to fail, or why their coverage starts to not, not be reflective of what it should be, or not be as critical as it should be. And then also just kind of throughout my own career with the mainstream media, I kind of saw that, like typical journalistic practices that you'd see or that you get trained in, where we're slowly kind of being eroded away because of, the need to generate clicks and, the things that, many people know about. So it's kind of been trying to re-inject some of those traditional elements of classic journalism into a publication, and doing it in a way that's kind of in line with the technology that we have at the moment with, crypto and encryption and all that kind of thing, and just making sure that it's a secure platform. And I'm still kind of building that out.
I thoroughly enjoy your work there, and it's one of the reasons that I keep having you back on Slow News Day, because you're one of the few people that are actually talking about this. I woke up this morning and the first thing I saw on Twitter was someone asking, why isn't there more coverage of Julian Assange? Why can't I find out anything about Julian Assange? So of course I was like, hey, we're about to go live with a vigil specifically about the thing that you're talking about. But it's you, it's Mo, it's Craig Murray, and when I say Mo, if you're unfamiliar, it's Mohammed Almazi. He writes out of Sputnik and the Canary and his own personal website, The Interregnum. He's a fabulous reporter. And then on the US, it's Kevin Gostola and our own Taylor Hudak, who did 99% of the coverage globally about the first week of Julian's extradition hearing that wasn't 100% bias, that wasn't spin, that wasn't trying to cover for the fact that this is at best a kangaroo court and show trial, where the judge in this case, the magistrate in this case, is little more than a concierge for the U.S. State Department, and that the U.S. State Department is the one who is basically in charge of the courtroom and in charge of these proceedings. So I want to thank you guys for that, because without you, it would just be a complete smear fest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's important. I don't know what more to say in that. I mean, it's not, you know, like I said, it was one of those things where it wasn't like a question, should I go and cover this hearings? It was like, no, this is the most important press freedom case of our generation. And not only that, I think it's extremely important for the future of our societies and our democracies, and you know, I guess we're witnessing that now, where I think we're in a state of what looks like kind of institutional failure, and you know, our kind of democraticness in our institutions is kind of, even though we could argue that it's not been there for a very long time, but it's kind of getting to that point now where it's, you know, it's really visible to most people on the street, not just people that engage in sort of alternative media. I think most people are now kind of waking up to, you know, why are there police patrolling the streets with body cams and breaking up protests, and you know, in our local streets, I guess people are used to seeing forces abroad in Syria and Iraq and so on. But I think, you know, as journalists and historians have tried to say for a long time, is that, you know, when you have these type of actions, you know, in the broader empire, they tend to come home as the empire starts to shrink. And I think that's what's happening now, is that we're seeing, you know, this kind of police state and this lack of transparency, I guess, or lack of accountability and governance is now kind of returning to UK, US, Australia more and more.
Last year, the Australian Federal Police raided the home of a sort of middle grade journalist by the name of Annika Smethurst. Now, she'd published a story in a mainstream newspaper about how the Australian government was instituting plans to spy on the populace through our devices. Now, she'd gotten this information from some leaked documents, and her home was raided. This was on the eve of the raids in the ABC offices. For you Americans, that's the equivalent to the British BBC. It's a government-owned media outlet. And anyway, as it's transpired, under the cloak of COVID-19, and you've got to bear in mind, Australia is in a unique position because I think we're the only government in the world that has abdicated its responsibility. It's shut down for COVID-19. And I live in the only state in this country, New South Wales, that has also done the same thing. So we've got no levels of government at the moment here, except for our councils. But we've got these oversight committees, and we've got these panels. So the federal government is paying its mining and telco CEO mates $500,000 for doing the job each. And you've got no one with lived experience. There's no health experts there. There's no nurses, no doctors, no one on that advisory panel on how we get through COVID-19. Instead, what we have is our Minister for Home Affairs, which covers Border Force. Now, any of you who know your history would know Australia was the first to lock out refugees on a grand scale about 10 years ago under Howard, I think it was. And we now lock them up. We spend billions and billions of dollars a year to lock up a handful of people and torture them, basically. So he was head of that, but now this new thing set up 3 years ago, the Homeland thing, it covers Border Force and the Australian Federal Police and ASIO, which is sort of like our secret service. Peter Dutton is now trying to make it so you will be jailed if you don't release your passwords to your devices upon the request of any police person for any reason. Now, this is all happening under the cloak of COVID-19. Now, I'm not disputing COVID-19 as being real or not. And I feel for you Americans who have people rioting in the streets saying they want their jobs back. We should really be using this as an opportunity, like a general strike, to starve the billionaires, because the billionaires only exist because of our collective labor and consumption. And if we all just sort of refuse to do that, and we do just lock down, we can then rewrite the rules. Because at the moment, you've got your vulture disaster capitalists rewriting the rules as fast as they can. And so we need to get coordinated while we're opposing COVID-19. We have to do it with COVID-19 restrictions in mind. So anyway, I'm derailing it slightly. What I'm wanting to talk about is this creeping groupthink that Tariq was referring to earlier about why journalists aren't writing about whistleblowers or Assange in particular. It's not just that. It is, if you do write about such things, the government will raid you. Now, the government's not acting on behalf of the people. It's acting on behalf of vested interests, the money hoarders, the 0.1%. The AFP raids on the ABC offices were to get documents from that were leaked by a guy called David McBride. Now, he was within the army. He was in 2 different special forces, really quite high up. And he exposed wrongdoing in Afghanistan. And he was very open about being the leaker of the documents. So there was no real need for the AFP to raid the ABC offices. But they did raid them to basically put the wind up anybody that thought of publishing anything.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to talk to David a couple of times. He's been on the Vigil here. He's been on my show. His story is fascinating because he really thought that he was doing the right thing, and he was trying to go through proper channels, and he was like, look, this is extremely wrong what's being done here, and it should be in the interest of all of, in terms of him saying it, all of my superiors to want to see this information and have it out there. And they turned around, and now he's facing 50 years. He feels very isolated, and not just because of the COVID lockdown, but by his own country, by his own people. That there's no one really in Australia who's willing to tell his story. So the fact that he has to come on, ostensibly an American program, even though we have international guests regularly, to get this information out there speaks volumes to the amount of suppression in the Australian press, and to carry that over into the global press, who should be aware of this situation. Now, I have always said, and Susie Dawson's One versus Five Eyes series, it bears this out, that we don't have governments that run intelligence agencies. We have intelligence agencies that run governments. And those global intelligence, refers to the US government, the Australian government, the UK government, it doesn't matter, as clients. They refer to these 0.01 percenters as clients, and they're manipulating and in many cases running both security, intelligence, and operations for these international multi-billion-dollar companies, as well as dictating legislation, being the silent partner in court proceedings and prosecutions, especially where whistleblowers are concerned.
Yeah, well, Serco, I think, is trying to take over the NHS. Is that correct, Tariq?
I haven't actually heard that personally, but I wouldn't be. Well, I'm not. Wouldn't. Well, I couldn't really comment, but I haven't heard that specifically. But I know Serco has been very involved with our prisons here. So I think they own about 70% of the prisons. I forget the actual numbers. I haven't written on it in a few years, but yeah, it was something like 70%. And obviously, this privatization is kind of what we're seeing across the board with everything, and that's obviously a big factor in all of this, of how public institutions that are there for a specific purpose, as soon as they get privatized, they start to lose sight of what their functions are. And I think if what you're saying about that with the hospitals is true, we can definitely see that that circle will be a troubling thing, considering the impact that they've had on the UK prison system. I think the average kind of occupancy of British prisons at the moment is something like 190% or something. So that every single jail cell is, nearly every jail cell has 3 people where it should be 2. And think about all the excess kind of the consequences of that.
So overcrowding is something that is we don't necessarily talk about enough, but I do, while we're all here, I do want to talk about Palantir's role in UK NHS and the American health system. I know that Palantir is trying to weasel its way into Australia as well. And if you guys are unfamiliar with Palantir, I would highly recommend just looking up Peter Thiel in WikiLeaks. Just go to wikileaks.org, in the search function, type in Peter Thiel, and it will give you an insight into all of his companies. But Palantir specifically is, I guess, one of the leading companies in what Jason Burmis refers to as the track trace database society that we live in. And they're essentially digital spies with a physical army.
Ooh.
Anyone want to pick up and roll?
Well, so I think they've got contracts in the US, they've got contracts with the FBI, the NSA, CIA, and then recently they got the contract with the Department of Homeland Security. And so, they're essentially a big data mining company that, can get, combine data from lots of different databases and data sets to kind of analyze that in new ways. And, if people are not concerned about that, I think, what happened when the DHS contract was given to them should be a good reminder for everyone. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with this story, but I think within months of that contract, I think they made 500, or they had that kind of big weekend where they used all these these new tools with the Department of Homeland Security, and they arrested 500 immigrants, I think, in the space of a weekend. And that's all due to this technology. And then in the UK, I think, as soon as we had this COVID-19 outbreak, we had this, you could immediately see where the government's priorities were. We had all these kind of mini scandals breaking out about doctors not having PPE and all these kind of things. But while all that was happening, these contracts were being signed, all these kind of steps were being taken, so it shows where the government's priorities were. They weren't caring about the nursing homes or whatever. It was, how can we deploy these contact tracing apps as soon as possible? The contract to Palantir in the UK to do the NHS XApp was given to them without the legal tendering process that's required as well. So I think that's kind of been a breach that's gone, just fairly unreported or hasn't been talked about. But yeah, it just shows you where, the intentions are of the government. It's to push these apps out, and anyone with common sense knows that these apps will actually have absolutely no impact on COVID-19 and how to kind of tackle it, or to deal with the situation?
There's actually, I believe there was studies out of Israel that showed that the contact tracing via smartphone actually discourages people from reporting that they had these symptoms, and that younger people and people that are asymptomatic or not sick are way less likely to get tested than people that are super, super, super ill. So even the existence of database contact tracing makes people just not even want to talk about the fact that they may or may not be sick. But we actually had a story come out here in the Daily Beast that it's really sad, because it's one of the only American news outlets to publish this information that we've been able to find across the internet that isn't just citing this information. But Palantir actually has recently got a contract with the Department of Health and Human Services to help the federal government create a new data platform called HHS Protect Now, which is basically the equivalent of what it's doing for the NHS over in the UK, which is setting up a track trace database coronavirus app. The Daily Beast has confirmed that Palantir will provide a major aspect of the analytics platform. Sources familiar told the Daily Beast that the Palantir data suits will be the primary contributor to the HHS Protect Now, if not the core element of the entire tool. Palantir's involvement in the creation of a new government coronavirus data platform system underscores the Trump administration's reliance on close political allies of the president to respond to the global pandemic. Thiel was Trump's earliest and highest profile backer in Silicon Valley and delivered a primetime speech in the 2016 Republican National Convention. A top donor to the conservative causes and the first outside investor in Facebook, Thiel, according to the Wall Street Journal, was instrumental in pushing the social networking giant to allow politicians to lie in advertisements on the platform. It's a policy that many outside observers believe that the Trump campaign helped, which Thiel has again pledged his support to. So we have the US government now signing contracts with Palantir, which is a buddy of Donald Trump, to get all of the health information about the Americans now. So it's something that we're seeing the same company built into the Five Eyes Alliance taking over the health of each one of these nations.
So what happened here in Australia was our government chose to use Amazon to store all that data, which is equally disturbing. But what's even more disturbing about these apps is, instead of individuals collectively relying on basic things like physical distancing, or social distancing as they call it, and basic barrier techniques of gloves, gowns, masks, or whatever's required in whatever situation, we're relying on an electronic device that's not really going to do anything but give us a false sense of security, and removing us from our own ability to have self-responsibility. We're losing that. This is just one step in a long line. An example would be in most Western urban environments, if the town you're living in has a blackout, 90%, you can be guaranteed 90% of those occupants will bump into their furniture. They don't know their own nest. They will literally walk into the edge of the lounge or whatever because there's no lights on, because we're reliant on those things. So we're losing our own innate abilities. It's like being able to grow your own veggies. Most people don't even know how to do that anymore. We're becoming more and more reliant. We really are becoming the battery animal of domesticated animals. We are the most domesticated of all animals already. We're now becoming battery-like. So this is a really bad thing about this app. And what we really should be doing is demanding collective change. We should be demanding that the 0.1% no longer, 0.01% no longer have so much control. And an easy way to do that is to lock down, treat it like a general strike. All those people that are out there talking about getting their rights back, which is happening quite a lot in America, and it's starting to bleed over here in Australia, they're not getting their rights back. They're actually giving up their rights, because while it seems really absurd that we're losing our rights by not being able to have freedom of movement, that freedom of movement is what is the powerhouse of this society in its current normal. So if we remove the ability for them to keep up their normal, we can then foster change. We can then present a platform for change. Instead, we've got people out there saying COVID-19 doesn't exist, or it's a factory-made thing from a lab, or whatever it is. They're arguments that are of no point. It's really how we address it. That's what the point is all about.
Well, a lot of those protests are astroturfed as hell. And what I mean by that, if you're not familiar with the concept, they're not grassroots, they're not organic, they're funded and people are following orders. And the people that are funding it typically are libertarian billionaires who have no interest really in the peasant class's freedom of movement, but they want us to generate their income. So if your protest is, please let me go back to work so that my boss can buy his mistress a Mercedes, you're not protesting right. You know, that's not a genuine protest. And that's what we see a lot with the people who stormed the Michigan State Capitol building. That's what they want. They want to generate more income for their employers. In many cases, and I want to make this perfectly clear, I understand that there are people who own small businesses who are getting absolutely crushed. That's intentional. And as Ian said, a collective general strike is how you get your agency back. We have in the US something called the Corona strike, which is an activist hub for people who want to rent strike, who want to do targeted labor strikes, who want to do general strikes, who want to do like bank strike. It's any way you want to exercise your ability to withhold labor for the possibility of gaining some agency out of it. I've been lucky enough to have the two ladies who organized the Corona strike on my show. That's a great episode. You should check it out. But more so, if you're listening in the US, go to go to Corona Strike on Facebook or on Twitter, and that will take you to their main page, because I can't remember if it's a .com or a .org off the top of my head. What they had there were something like 77,000 separate GoFundMes for people who needed healthcare expenses, living expenses, and you name it. And they're trying to consolidate that into one universal fund that people can then, use to supplement our bare minimum existence, let alone prosper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's I share the sentiment, I think, but it kind of seems a little bit similar to this kind of 2008 situation where, I think lots of people were protesting, and rightfully so. But I think, if such things are happening, I think it has to be clear, what are you trying to achieve, and I think another important thing to do in all of this is that, we're seeing this really rapid development of the surveillance state and surveillance capitalism. I think, activists and people that work in cryptology and encryption need to be working just as rapidly to kind of create the countermeasures and the counter movements and the tools, to help people to kind of maintain their privacy and to give journalists security with, when they're working. I think we need to be moving as quickly as these intelligence agencies are.
Well, something Steve was just referring to there is, the bailouts that we experienced in 2008 and are currently experiencing here. We bailed out our airline to the tune of $715 million. We should have bought that Do you know what I mean? It's our taxes that are bailing it out. It's the society's taxes. So that means we now own $715 million worth of Qantas, but we're not. And of course, the CEO, because they brokered that deal, they get $6 million bonus for brokering that deal with our taxes. These big companies often avoid paying taxes as well, like Apple here in Australia, or Microsoft, or Google. They all don't pay any tax at all, because it's all offshore. You know, what we have to get into the mindset of is it's our society that's too big to fail, not those companies. Those companies at the moment, interest rates are at zero. They can borrow money if they want money, you know, or if they want to bail out, they're selling us. They're selling those of us that are bailing them out, they're selling the society that amount of shares. We need to be getting those sorts of ideas into the heads of those protesters. Unfortunately, as you pointed out, they are astroturfers. They're Tea Party people, really. That's what they are. And I don't know how you do that. How you'd have to go into those bars and drink with those people and speak their language and talk a different narrative to them, for them to get it, without ever telling them that they got it wrong in the first place.
Well, a lot of it shows that people like this system, the people in power, now have to respond to the actual people on the ground, that there is this underlying discord that exists regardless of political ideology. And in the right-wing movements, it's captured in benefiting the billionaire class that captured those right-wing movements. But I think a way to really break through to people is to try to move past the conversation about coronavirus and into what's being taken from all of us during coronavirus. Because regardless of if you want your job back or if you want better rights at your job, the fact that your health information is being turned over to a private global corporation that's used to assault and attack immigrants across the country, that's a very impactful thing that largely gets ignored because of the left-right duality of what both sides want. So I think that if we can find a way to bridge that gap and say, hey, your health information just got sold to a private corporation, then that could make a much larger impact for people, because they don't even understand that in the US, the way that these apps are going to be developed is they flag one person with coronavirus. The people that they were in contact with get flagged and put into a 14-day quarantine. And then the people that were in contact with those people, so a two-step process, would get put into 14-day quarantine. And they don't tell you who that original person was. They don't tell you who you were in contact with. They will just say, hey, you need to go into quarantine. So whether you're a general striker or a reopen our economy striker, the fact that they can just take you without telling you why you're being taken and say, hey, go to your house or you're going to jail. It reminds me of what I believe his name was Jacob talked about a couple weeks ago during the Sork Sydney vigil. I think it was the week before World Press Freedom Day, where there's been an Australian activist organizer that was arrested a couple hours before the protests. Yeah. And with these coronavirus apps, what it'll give them the power to do is to send a notification to that person saying, hey, you're on house arrest now. And it's a day before you leave for a protest. And now that person is in direct violation of federal law if they choose to use their right to assemble, because we've given federal authorities the power to say, no, we can tell anyone that they lose all right of association. And this is at the same time that Julian's court trial is going on, removing the rights of a free press globally. So the thing that's lost is coronavirus is this double whammy of you lose all news about free press being destroyed while free association is being destroyed. So it really creates this underlying chaos that I just hope people will be able to see and move through as a larger group.
I think you're right about getting the idea across to these people that are riled up about what it is they're about to lose. What we also need to get them excited about is what they could gain by how they strategically do this. And I think when and you've got to really couch your argument to your people. Those people don't care about immigrants and them being locked up. So they're not the people to talk to about that. I mean, Australia has probably got the record for the worst way it deals. We've done worse than build a border wall. You know, we and it's Serco that's also funding a lot of this. But we've got detention islands, and they cost billions of dollars. Like, I don't know how many billions have been spent. I know we've spent a couple of billion to lock up 5 people, five people on Christmas Island for 12 months. 2 billion. You know, a government that can waste money like that. But of course, we've got a guy called Peter Dutton, who's, I mentioned earlier, the head of Home Affairs and ASIO and the Australian Federal Police and Border Force. He's a cop from Queensland. Now, Queensland suffered from a premier that set it back a couple of generations in their education system. Sorry, you put your finger up. Anyway, so sorry, I'm derailing the thread. Back to you.
I think Andrew was just signaling that he was running off for a moment. In terms of communicating to people that are politically identify with like the Tea Party, what I've found to be successful is, and what we do here at Action for Assange and what we've been doing since the very beginning, is trying to push the conversation into a post-partisan realm. This isn't about right or left. This is about our ability to have access to a free flow of information, uncensored, unspun information. And as long as you can center the conversation around something that we all agree on, which is free speech, the ability to go to a website like WikiLeaks and get primary source material that we can then digest and make our own decisions on the subjects discussed in this primary source material. That is something that isn't just liberating, it's necessary, it's vital. With the health of a free society depends on access to a free flow of information, and everybody can understand that, or nearly everybody can understand that. There are some people who are so, I guess, interlaced with the machine, as it were, that they, you know, they'll turn their nose up at something like that. But those people are really few and far between. The average human being wants to know that we have a free flow of information, and without that, we're much worse off, not just in our own, you know, societies, but collectively as a planet. It's, I don't know. I mean, it's just something that we found effective. When we were in DC in February, and Josh, if you could please pull up the link to the GoFundMe for September. But when we were in DC in February, we spoke to people of all political ideologies. We had a WikiLeaks flag with us, and they've signed this flag. They put their names on it as almost a living document to a post-partisan reality. We didn't really have any problems talking to, like, for example, Medea Benjamin's name is on this flag, and so is Michael Flynn Jr. You know, the disparity between the two couldn't be wider, but they both agreed that this is a necessary thing to have, a necessary movement. Free Assange movement as an idea is a necessary idea. And one of the things that I have always admired about Julian Assange and about scientific journalism in general is that you can't arrest an idea. That's
True.
my rant.
Yeah, true.
And I guess just to add to that, you know, they've been willing to, you know, to kind of embarrass both the left and right with, don't hold their punches in terms of, what documents they put out for everyone. Not afraid to kind of, I guess, even harm their own reputation with their own supporters, as they, most people I think saw the public interest in the 2016 DNC emails, but obviously that cost them a lot of reputational damage within the left. But obviously it was still the right thing to do.
Yes, exposing wrongdoings.
And the reputational damage on the left from the DNC leaks, it largely comes from the fact that the actual left-wing progressive leadership at the time didn't use that to fight back against what was exposed, never picked it up and said, hey, look at this bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I should be the nominee. I'm not stepping down and endorsing this person. So that was a big thing that added on, is the person that was supposed to stand up at the time when those leaks happened didn't. Mm-hmm. And since then hasn't for the last almost 5 years now.
I take you're talking about Bernie Sanders.
Right.
We call him a sheepdog over here. And he's done it again with Biden.
Yeah, I've said that Bernie Sanders' hip hop name is Sheep Doggy Dog. What he exists for is to make sure people stay within that duopoly. That he's a recruiting tool for the Democratic Party, which is at best legislatively a center-right party.
Yeah.
And the idea that Bernie Sanders is some kind of like flaming left-wing radical is a narrative spun to make it look like the Democrats are the sensible center who in reality spread the U.S. empire, destroy the lives of poor people of all colors, specifically targeting Black and brown people in their legislation, and with the explosion of the police state, with the creation of ICE, for that matter.
So Susie Dawson really summed up the support that people have for Bernie Sanders the best. And this is going to be a terrible paraphrase, but that people who support Bernie Sanders have a particular set of beliefs and project those beliefs onto him and say, well, I believe in these things and I believe in him, so he believes in these things too. And it's a lot of what happens with politicians, regardless of whether it's Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Boris Johnson. They get this projected image of, well, I believe in these things, so then this person that the TV shows me also believes in these things because I do. And so there becomes a lot of this internal conflict that people have with it, just down to saying, well, this person's not doing the thing that I believe in, but I believe in both of them, so what do I do?
I think I might have talked about this with you guys previously, but I think it's really important to for people try and understand the Big Five personality theory. That it's because it's pretty much very reliable in identifying people's politics and how they're gonna vote. If anyone kind of saw the Cambridge Analytica papers, it shows that these big data companies are fully aware of how the Big Five personality theory kind of will affect whether you end up voting left or right. But I think it's on a personal level, it can be very insightful to see that, okay, I have these kind of personality traits, and these are the ones that typically align with left or right. So you you realize that why you're voting for certain people is that actually it's not that their policies are better or worse. It's actually that your own personality, in terms of things that you like and dislike, they get the end result of that is the people that you vote for based on your personalities. So I think that's kind of a useful tool in all of this to kind of try and understand the situation, because Cambridge Analytica and Palantir, and they're all interlinked. They're working together. They're aware of these theories in terms of with the Donald Trump campaign, for example, with Cambridge Analytica, because they know that if you're high in conscientiousness, which is one of the big five, and maybe I forget the other ones, but if you have these certain traits, you're more likely to vote right wing. If you have these certain traits, you're more likely to vote left wing. And with that, they specifically didn't target people that they knew that their personality was going to be left leaning regardless. They only targeted people that might, that are on the fringes of the right, or have the types of personalities to vote for the right. But I also think it can be very helpful to the discussion we were talking about before with the Tea Party people. When you start to understand these, why certain people vote in different ways based on their personality, I think it really opens up how you can talk about these things, because I used to be someone that was extremely left wing, and I was, a massive Bernie and Jeremy Corbyn supporter back in my more naive days. But then when I kind of started to understand these theories, I could talk to someone that's on the far right or extreme right, or someone with very different ideas about immigration or so on. But I can now, because I have that understanding of the big five, I can see why they feel about certain issues a certain way. Because I think, just to take the immigration debate, for example, I think so left-leaning people tend to have, like things to be open. That's why left-leaning people tend to be the artists, the musicians. They like ideas to flow from one another. And that kind of is how it flows out into borders, where, they want borders to flow. The people that are naturally going to be more right-leaning are more, prefer structure and order and tight rules around everything. And that's why, when they argue for greater border control, it's not because they dislike immigrants necessarily, or even though there's people that do kind of cross that line into racism and xenophobia. But I think it's more of an instinctive personality thing of, they see borders as more of an essential thing that's needed to structure society and things like that. So I think it's, it can be it makes it easier to talk to people from a different point of view without kind of having these partisan clashes that we're seeing.
I personally, and anybody who's watched my show for any length of time has heard this, but I think that as society has become more and more secular, political ideology has been where that same energy has gone. And I see it a lot here, at least in the US, where it's a religious fervor in terms of I'm a progressive, or I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. It takes on the same characteristics as religion, where individuals are elevated to a kind of sainthood or part of the Godhead. It becomes increasingly hard to give people information that runs counter to what is ostensibly and ultimately a tenet of faith. Because when you do bring information to a zealot that counteracts their belief system, what they do is shrink back further into their belief system and surround themselves with like-minded people who, I guess, coddle that belief system, reinforce that belief system. Which is why it's so important to bring the conversation out of the political realm and into a post-partisan reality, because then you can have those conversations. And when it's not couched as right, left, center, when it's couched as this is, a thing we can all agree on, this giant corporation should not have the right to all of your health information. The US government shouldn't be able to go into your web browsing history without a warrant. Things that make sense to everyone. And if you can depoliticize it, then I think you have the opportunity to reach more people.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. And I think also, just to kind of add to that, is that people's, like you mentioned, people's political identities are so ingrained into who they are. So, and as soon as you get into those discussions, people automatically will put up a defensive guard because they don't want to kind of damage the group that they're in, because it's so much intertwined with their personal identity and who they are. You can't kind of live in New York City and not be a left winger, because it would damage your social circles and all that kind of thing. So I think you're definitely right about where that conversation needs to go.
Well, look, thank you very much for having me on your program tonight, this afternoon.
I just need to run off 1 second, sorry.
I imagine it's winding up now, is that correct?
Yeah, we're going to start transitioning into our news segment. So Ian, thank you very much. I know it's incredibly late or incredibly early, depending on how you want to look at it. Will you please tell people, because we do have an international audience here, and I've been contacted personally by people who live in Sydney and around Sydney who want to become more involved. So please tell them where they can find you, where they can find information about Assange-related groups in your area. And again, thank you very much for being on the vigil with us today.
Look, thank you so much for having me. And also, it's been a real pleasure to be part of this inspiring conversation this evening. People can write to us at info, that's info, .sawc Sydney, SYDNEY, @gmail.com, or the @ SAWC Sydney on Facebook, Twitter, or Medium. Unfortunately, we lost our website some time ago and haven't rebuilt a new one. And of course, from that, we've got access to groups around the country. So if you want to write in, we will send you the link to what's in your nearest city. And of course, if there isn't something in your nearest city, start something. Thanks, fellas. See you soon.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
So I want to thank you very much for joining us too, Tariq. If you could, please let people know where they can find you and where they can find your work.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. Always a pleasure. TariqHaddad.com, so TAREQHADDAD.com, or thewatchdog.net. Yeah, like I've mentioned before, I'm making a few updates to the website, so it might be jumping around a bit, but you should find something there.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today, buddy.
All right, thank you.
So into news today, just to start us off here, if we could, Amnesty International just recently put out a piece to urge the U.S. President Trump, to release Reality Winner. So I want to dive into this a little bit because it's something that I think is extremely important, because we're literally in an all-out war against the free press right now, and I appreciate anything that Amnesty does to assist in all this. So cool, we have that up right now. Amnesty International USA urges President Trump to release whistleblower Reality Winner. The COVID-19 pandemic and Reality's underlying medical conditions underscore the urgent need for President Trump to act without delay. Winner has filed a petition for commutation for her sentence, and it should be considered immediately. I believe when we had the Winner family on, they had recently just finished up or were in the process of working on something like this. Is that correct, Steve?
Yeah, there have been a couple of different appeals for commutation. They had just had one denied, so this was the follow-up to that. Rob, thank you for the super chat, by the way. That's awesome. We love you. You are one of our biggest supporters, and we can't thank you enough. What's been going on with Reality Winner though, and look, man, I gotta say this, as helpful as it is that Amnesty International is getting on board with this, they still won't label her or Julian Assange a prisoner of conscience. They never labeled Chelsea Manning as a prisoner of conscience, or Jeremy Hammond. Vanessa Beasley has done a lot of work on Amnesty International as an organization. It's helpful to the people who look to organizations like Amnesty to provide them with a conscience, that they come out and make declarative statements like this. But you know me, man, like I think they can always go a little bit further in this. And this is the second request for commutation that Reality Winner has put forth. There's absolutely no reason that she should be incarcerated right now. None whatsoever. She has served the longest sentence for anyone charged under the Espionage Act in the last 50 or 60 years. It is, and again, we've done this. We've gone through the documents that she provided The Intercept. What she did in the leak that she did more to shoot holes in the Russiagate narrative than prove it. And ultimately, I think that's why she's incarcerated, not because she abused protocol, but because the documents that she leaked prove that this is, as Ian would call it, a fit up. Russia, and almost every day, we learn more about why Russiagate was a hoax, why Russiagate is the biggest conspiracy theory that's been put forth onto the American people in recent memory, up until, if you don't stay at home or give up all of your health information to an organization like Palantir, you're going to get rounded up. Like that is what's being done under the guise of COVID, and the people that are being persecuted further as a result of this. Look at who it is. It's whistleblowers, it's publishers, it's journalists. This is who's paying the price, because they're letting out pedophiles, they're letting out rapists, they're letting out fucking thieves. Like, it is mind-boggling the kind and quantity of prisoners who are being released because of this exact thing. And yet we find non-violent inmates being left to rot and possibly die as a result of this virus. And Amnesty still won't call that a prisoner of conscience. Like, I'm glad they put the statement out. I am. But again, y'all know me. Like, I want them to go further. I want us to go further. I want this to be something that permeates the consciousness of people who aren't normally aware of these situations. So hopefully, by Amnesty making this statement, some people's eyes are drawn to it who look to NGOs to be their conscience.
And I really hope, because even in their statements, Amnesty statements about this, it still had like the Russia spin, and this article on the Medium still has the Russia spin, where that's largely irrelevant, because the documents themselves, like Steve had pointed out, don't show anything. There's no actual evidence. There's may-haves, there's potentiallys, there's could-have-beens, there's we're not sure if it was successfuls, but there's never, this was the date, time, and information that was taken. But the larger point is, whistleblowers should have as much protection as journalists and publishers do. I mean, not that they have a ton right now, but should have that same high level and high standard of First Amendment protection, because there's no reason for Reality Winner to be in jail. There's no reason for Jeremy Hammond or Chelsea Manning to have been or be incarcerated. And this just shows how they value the people that they release, because to them, you're only hurting a couple people if you're a couple poor people, if you're a rapist or a murderer or a pedophile. But if you're someone that's willing to leak national classified information, well, you're going to damage the entire state. so it creates this terrible, terrible paradox. And she's one of the people that's been persecuted. I think she has the longest sentence of any single whistleblower charged under the Espionage Act as well. And this was one of the people charged during the Trump administration's war on whistleblowers as well. She wasn't charged under the Obama era. This was released, I think it was 4 or 5 pages of documentation to The Intercept, and then put in jail for almost a decade.
Yeah, and again, I can't say this enough. What those documents did, regardless of her position on Russiagate, like, she thought she was helping. She thought she was doing her job as an NSA analyst to help get the truth out about Russiagate, which means, in my mind, like those documents, all they do is shoot holes in the theory. All they do is make Russiagate less plausible. So I can't speak to her mindset as to whether or not she thought she was going to help bring down the Russians. But what those documents prove is that it's false. It's a hoax. We're going to transition into an article by the Gray Zone now, which big shout out to that organization for being able to get access to these and to these kinds of stories. They're becoming they're definitely more reliable than the Intercept, because the Intercept burns sources like I do cigarettes. There are 3 whistleblowers currently incarcerated because they went to the Intercept, and Matthew Cole is, in my mind, and according to John Kiriakou, the reason why this is happening. If you look at who wrote the articles about those leaks, it's Matthew Cole's name that's attached to it. Pierre Omidyar, I can't speak to his rationale, but at any rate, let's dive into this article. I need to pull it up. So Andrew, if you have it up, please kick that off.
Yeah. So this is the American Friends. New court files expose Sheldon Adelson's security team in U.S. spy operation against Julian Assange. The byline, an exclusive investigation by the Gray Zone reveals new details on the critical role of Sheldon Adelson's Las Vegas Sands played in the apparent CIA spying operation targeting Julian Assange, and exposes the Sands securities staff who helped coordinate the malicious campaign. And so I want to give a big shout out to Max Blumenthal for writing this, because this is an absolutely wonderful piece.
And real quick, let's be perfectly clear. The Gray Zone does not thank Stefania Maruzzi, but they should, because they refer to UC Global files that the Gray Zone and other outlets had got. Those are Stefania Maruzzi's Freedom of Information requests. So she deserves just heaps of credit, because she's been going after not just UC Global, but information about Julian Assange in general for years and years and years, and is currently being harassed by intelligence for it. So big props to Stefania for this. And I'll shut up now.
So as the co-founder of a small security consulting firm called UC Global, David Morales spent years slogging through the minor leagues of the private mercenary world. A former Spanish Special Forces officer, Morales yearned to be the next Eric Prince, the Blackwater founder who leveraged his army for hire to high-level political connections across the globe. By 2016, he had secured just one significant contract to guard the children of Ecuador's then President Rafael Correa and his country's embassy in the UK. The London embassy contract provided especially valuable to Morales, however. Inside the diplomatic compound, his men guarded WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, a top target of the U.S. government who had been living in the building since Correa granted his political asylum in 2012. It was not long before Morales realized that he had a big league opportunity on his hands. In 2016, Morales rushed off alone to a security fair in Las Vegas, hoping to rustle up lucrative new gigs by touting his role as the guardian of Assange. Later that day, or days later, he returned to his company's headquarters in Spain with exciting news. From now on, we're going to be playing in the first division, Morales announced to his employees. When the co-owner of UC Global asked what Morales meant, he responded that he had turned to the dark side, the apparent reference to U.S. intelligence services. The Americans will find us contracts around the world, Morales assured his business partner. So just that one piece, that they knew what the fuck they were doing, that they even said, we turn to the dark side, we have our American business partners. Like that is how bad the systemic corruption within our government has become, that we are literally considered the dark side of the international intelligence community.
Well, and I mean, look, that's completely on merit. I mean, if you look at the CIA's role since its inception as the OSS, what it is a tool for destabilization, overthrow, persecution, and assassination. There's a number of ways that people have described the CIA, and one is that it stands for coups, interventions, and assassinations. That's its function, its primary function. And let's not forget, this is an agency that was created on the back of Operation Paperclip, which was the Nazi draft after World War II, where all of the scientists and intelligence experts and the think tanks around Hitler's Germany were recruited to become part of what became the Five Eyes countries. We've got, and I can't stress this enough, we've got proof, solid proof, not just in the Gray Zones article, but through El País, the Spanish outlet that's been following this case from day one, reporting on it, that UC Global, through Sheldon Adelson, was delivering not just intelligence reports, but video and audio throughout the Ecuadorian embassy to the CIA for the explicit purpose of damaging Julian Assange and the people that came to visit him. They bugged and videotaped the women's bathroom, for fuck's sake. Like, this is not just an international incident, but it should be an international outrage. I can't stress this enough. The case of Julian Assange is the case of the breakdown and erosion of international rule of law. The number of laws that have been violated, not just by the US, but by the UK, by Sweden, and by Ecuador, all to go to the erasure of a journalist and publisher, should be enough, not just to dismiss the case in court outright, but to spark a giant international movement of regular human beings who want to live a life out from under the boot of global intelligence.
Well, the problem is that boot of global intelligence is so nice and covert and camouflage that people don't even realize that they're living under it most of the time. Where
no, but it couldn't be more clear at this point.
Right, and that's the crazy part, is as soon as you want to look up to see the person stepping on you, everyone can literally see this global intelligence community trying to crack down with authoritarian technocratic devices that they'll implant on you and in you to be able to track you. But people don't realize that. Like this article here, it's immensely long and it basically chronicles out most everything, but I want to go down to the part that outlines it's titled Pompeo outlines the attack on Assange.
I'll jump in on that because I never miss an opportunity to kick around Mike Pompeo. Per the article, Pompeo's first public speech as CIA director, hosted at the Washington, D.C.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank on April 13, 2017, was one of the most paranoid and resentful addresses ever delivered by an agency chief. The former Republican congressman from Kansas opened his speech with an extended tirade against the Philip Agees of the world, referring to the CIA whistleblower who handed over thousands of classified documents to leftist publishers that revealed shocking details of illegal U.S. regime change and assassination plots around the world. Alluding to Agee's contemporary soulmates, Pompeo declared, quote, "The only thing they don't share with Agee is the need for a publisher. All they require now is a smartphone and internet access. In today's digital environment, they can disseminate stolen U.S. secrets instantly around the globe to terrorists, dictators, hackers, and anyone else seeking to do us harm," end quote. The CIA made no secret about the identity of its target. It is time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is, a non-state hostile intelligence service, often abetted by state actors like Russia. For the next several minutes, Pompeo ran it against Assange, branding him as a narcissist and a fraud and a coward. The right-wing Republican even quoted criticism of WikiLeaks publisher by The Intercept's Sam Biddle. Next, Pompeo pledged a long-term campaign of countermeasures against WikiLeaks. He said, quote, "We have to recognize that we can no longer allow Assange and his colleagues the latitude to use free speech values against us." I'm going to read that one more time, because this is the guy who was at the time director of the CIA, now director of the State Department. We have to recognize that we can no longer allow Assange and his colleagues the latitude to use free speech values against us, to give them the space to crush us with misappropriated secrets as a perversion of what our great Constitution stands for. It ends now, end quote. Are you fucking kidding me, Andrew Smith?
And that is embodied in the argument that is made in court when the U.S. prosecution says the First Amendment does not apply to foreign nationals, but the Espionage Act does. That is that statement right there, that mindset, that mentality of we can change the rules when the rules no longer suit us, is what gives a nation and a leader powers, essentially. Your ability to stir the pot, to crush dissent, and then say, no, what we did was legal because I had the power to rewrite the rules.
Yeah, it's... If that doesn't scream totalitarianism to you, I don't know what to say. Back to the article real quick. Though Pompeo said he recognized that the CIA is legally prohibited from spying on people through electronic surveillance in the United States, he seemed to have already put into motion an aggressive program to spy not only on Assange, but on his American friends, lawyers, and virtually everyone in his immediate vicinity. Carried out by UC Global, the campaign entailed recording private conversations of U.S. targets, opening their phones, photographing their personal information, and even stealing their email passwords. The CIA's apparent attack on Assange had been activated weeks earlier when WikiLeaks announced the publication of CIA's Vault 7 files. It would not be long before Adelson's security team began preparing space for Morales in Vegas. In case we didn't go over that part, what happened, there's a massive security conference that takes place in Las Vegas every year. Probably won't happen this year, but in years past. And people who have these private security firms all gather around the world, all gather in Las Vegas at the Sands, owned by Sheldon Adelson, in order to commiserate and plot with would-be clients. Morales went to Vegas seeking a paymaster, and he found one in the CIA.
It's as mafioso as you can publicly get. Like, there's a bunch of, I don't want to call them it, but like skin-headed fucking bloodthirsty mercenaries that gather around in a casino of a billionaire to figure out what they're going to do next week.
Morales has longer hair than me, but okay. He may not now. I don't know.
That's how I picture all the Blackwater people, I guess, and people of that cast of character.
Oh, active duty, yeah. But once you're the boss, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like, we talk about this a whole bunch, but I don't think enough people have seen it. We have a video of Cassandra Fairbanks breaking down essentially like the real-time access to Julian Assange's communications and literal personal conversations, in-person conversations that they had, when she talks about how she went there to warn Julian that they were going after him for the Chelsea Manning leaks. And then the next thing you know, she was locked in a closet for hours and essentially got told, no, you pissed Adelson off.
Yeah. Oh, shit. Sorry about the camera there. If you haven't, after the vigil today, please go look on Action for Assange's YouTube page and find that interview that we did with Cassandra Fairbanks back in February. The amount of bombshells that she drops in that like 15 minutes alone give people an insight not only into how and why Julian Assange was targeted at that time in January of 2019. Very little more than 3 months before he was, as Andrew says, trafficked out of the Ecuadorian embassy. But it gives you an insight into how long the Trump administration had been planning to make Julian Assange the sacrifice on the altar of press freedom.
Yeah, like it literally shows how it dates back to before the Trump administration and how he came in and just kept following the same set of orders. That the best Julian got was a back channel through what the fuck was that guy's name? Dana Rohrabacher?
Dana Rohrabacher, yeah.
Dana Rohrabacher. Kim.com had in some way facilitated if Julian Assange would come out and say that it was Seth Rich and not the Russians, that President Trump might give him a pardon. And this was 10 months after Julian Assange had gone on TV and said it wasn't the Russians, but here's this reward for whoever finds the murderer of Seth Rich. So literally the best the Trump administration had, in my opinion, was a jest saying, hey, well, if you do the thing that you already did, we'll let you go. And for anyone who knows history, it feels kind of akin to when Edison told Tesla, like, oh, I guess you don't understand American humor in regards to making his technology. But the fact that Adelson can wield this much power, and the fact that he's literally the liaison to turn this information over to the CIA is fucking disgusting.
I mean, that you could couch everything that's happened to Julian Assange over the last 9 years as fucking disgusting, and I'm laughing about it so I don't scream. That's just how I process and deal with things. Let's go back to this article real quick, and then we can start to either go to one more. We can shout out that podcast, and then we can wrap up. I want to make this we've covered UC Global a lot, but there are some points that really need to be driven home. We got to include Nagel include Nagel in this as well. In December 2017, Morales was summoned to Las Vegas Sands for a special session with the American Friends. On the 10th of that month, he sent a series of emails from a static IP address at Adelson's Venetian Hotel to his spy team. The messages contained a new set of instructions. Quote, "Nobody can know about my trips, mainly my trips to the USA," Morales said to his employees, because SINAIN is onto us. SINAIN, SENAIN, is the Ecuadorian Special Intelligence Service, like our CIA. To further limit the Ecuadorian government's access to the surveillance system installed in the embassy, he instructed his workers, quote, "We can't give them access to some of the program's services so they don't realize who has more logins or who is online inside the system. But everything must look like they have access to it." Morales sent his team a PowerPoint presentation containing instructions for the new system. The aim of the instructions was to create two separate users, an administrator for the Ecuadorian client with no access to the login, so they would not be able to notice the second user, a separate security login for the Americans who would be in full control of the system surveillance features. obtained by the Gray Zone. And if we could pull this up, please, Josh, it's about halfway down on the thing. It's a slide presentation, PowerPoint presentation. Obtained by the Gray Zone, these slides were composed in perfect English by a native speaker who is clearly not Morales. The bullet points on them say rename the admin account to something else such as security, create a new user with access to everything except the logs, and name this account administrator. If you are setting up the system directly on the NVR, ensure the following permission boxes are unchecked. So they've got both Stefania Maruzzi and the Gray Zone have full documentation that that UC Global was playing not just the Ecuadorian intelligence service, but the entire government in order to ship this information over to the CIA.
I think Ecuador's response to this is going to be really telling, because I assume that there are members of their intelligence service, what was the NENAIN, however you pronounce that, that are in support of Assange and feel very fucked over by this entire situation, especially with this information coming out. Because this is a very, like, I don't want to call it a basic trick, but hiding a user from another computer user isn't the most complex thing that they could even really do. So their level of sophistication is as high as it isn't, I guess, in being able to deploy these technologies and get things like this done. But yeah, I mean, I think whatever comes out of the nation of Ecuador is going to be really telling. That's, I think, a big country to watch right now, because a lot of this revolves around their contract with this intelligence agency being exploited.
Well, and not only that, but the continuation of the Spanish trial against David Morales and the more information that can be gleaned from it will hopefully be incorporated into the extradition hearing in September. That's something that we all need to follow up on a little bit, is whether or not that information is going to be allowed into the hearing. My hope is Julian's legal team calls David Morales as a witness. That's my hope. Because they've got more than enough documentation to prove beyond all shadow of a doubt that not just Julian Assange's lawyer-client confidentiality was violated, but everyone who came into that embassy had experienced a violation of their civil or human rights in some way.
Yeah, I mean, even like down to the fact that they were trying to steal diapers out of trash cans to DNA test a baby. That's the extent that these motherfuckers were going to, is they literally said, like, hey, you shouldn't bring your baby here anymore because we're trying to figure out whose baby it is. Like, that's fucked up.
And that's the thing. There were a couple of people who worked security for UC Global that were at the Ecuadorian embassy that blew the whistle on this, that what was being done was so heinous and such a complete and total violation that they had to tip off Stella Morris. They had to tip off a couple other people that were coming into the embassy. And then we find out through Cassandra Fairbanks that the embassy was being monitored because she knew within 24 hours. His name Arthur Schwartz. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, Arthur Schwartz.
Because Arthur Schwartz was threatening her via text and via phone calls that she recorded, and eventually those got leaked.
And to her, I just want to say thank you, because that is an act of heroism, like being willing to release information at that level about the most direct players involved. Like, I want to give Cassandra a huge, huge thank you for being involved in that way.
For sure. Let's go ahead and kind of run through the last little bit of news here. We've got about 15 or 20 minutes. There is a podcast that dropped yesterday or the day before. That's okay. I'm just gonna give it a shout out real quick. If you go to Epicenter EPI Center.tv, it's episode 339. It's called "What Julian Assange Represents to the Crypto Movement," and it's an interview with John Shipton, Julian's father. And Harry Halpin, who's the CEO of NIM Technologies and also a friend of Julian Assange's. NIM Technologies proliferates information about cryptocurrency. There's a number of different ways that a healthy and free Julian Assange benefits the proliferation of both crypto technology and encryption. So when you have time, and I'll drop a link to that at least into my chat, give it a listen, especially if you're into the whole crypto movement. Moving on, we did the Medium article.
I think our last thing is the Big Brother Watch information that came out. So this was, what's the date on this? Yesterday at 9 a.m. our time here on the East Coast. Big Brother Watch said, wow, every charge under the Emergency Coronavirus Act reviewed by CPS so far, 44, was wrong and has been reversed. Plus 12 wrongful charges under the lockdown regulations have been reversed. So basically,
let's be real clear here real quick. CPS refers to Crown Prosecutorial Service, not the U.S. Child Protective Service. This is a UK-based thing. So when we say CPS, in this case, we mean Crown Prosecutors, the British legal system. Just wanted to clear that up real quick.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And this is referring to the lockdown that happened in the UK, because theirs was much more extreme than the US's. But the Crown Prosecution Service is reviewing, this came out May 2nd, every single case of people charged under lockdown regulations and lockdown rules, and under the other emergency coronavirus measures. So literally every single person that got charged with this, it was thrown out. They literally, as they're reviewing it, every single one that they have reviewed, they've said, no, this was horribly wrong, not done correctly, and has just been since removed. So I guess that's a little bit of good pushback. Like, I guess that's a little bit of good news. I just hope that they completely reverse these measures, because as we've talked about before, these emergency lockdown measures in the UK literally give them the right of indefinite detention. So the fact that they're throwing out charges is good, but the fact that these powers still exist is very bad.
And if we could move on to the Last American Vagabond article, and just kind of give a little bit of background on that. I know this is mostly video, but I'm pretty sure we have Ryan's permission to play any of this. Okay, it's all video. In that case, I'll just point you guys to their wrap up. We've talked about this a little bit. Last week last Saturday on the vigil, Ryan Christian from the Last American Vagabond was our guest. That's where he first brought up AI powered pre-crime for health. Ryan was on my show, Slow News Day, on Wednesday of this week. We went into that a little bit more. This is not me making anything up. I want to make this perfectly clear. Ryan went directly to the website, showed the video. There's a series of health tracking apps that have been deployed. And I noticed somebody in the A4A chat a while back, because it gets real jumpy for me when I switch back and forth between screens. It said, don't take your phone update because the tracking apps are automatically on it. That's 100% true. The COVID tracking apps are part of your phone's May updates. My recommendation is to leave your phone at home. or if you can, make a cheap Faraday cage to put your phone in while you travel. Never take it out of your car or your vehicle if you can. And if you can help it, don't put your phone within 12 to 25 feet of anyone else if you don't want to become part of this track trace system. We're in a weird spot. We really are. With health pre-crime, they're going to start introducing one-dose syringes that have an RFID chip attached to them. We watched the video of it on my show. This is a real thing. Nobody's making this up. This is a product that is starting to be rolled out. That RFID chip then sends your information to an AI software program that learns everything about your biology. This is the world that we are currently living in. This is no longer science fiction future. This is our reality. Big shout out to Ryan for the work that Last American Vagabond is doing. He's got Whitney Webb as a staff writer now, and Daniel Bros. Maybe I'm messing up his first name, but Bros. Okay, Daniel Bros, who is another excellent researcher and writer in his own right, have both come on board The Last American Vagabond, and TLAV is a completely demonetized platform on YouTube. All of the people who are trying to proliferate accurate information about, not about COVID itself, but about the track trace systems that have been developed to help us during this crisis, all of those people are getting demonetized and shut down. I guarantee you I'm next. Like it's getting to the point to where we're all going to get pushed out into the corners of like Rockfin and BitChute and DLive. So if you are listening right now and you are a regular viewer of programs like Last American Vagabond or Jason Burmes's show, follow them to these alternative platforms. It's really, there's about a 10% rate of follow onto new platforms that I've noticed, that I've experienced, and looking at the numbers that Burmes has on Rockfin or Ryan has on Rockfin, that 10% is pretty constant. Let's increase those numbers, please. Let's do that, because the more we can get away from having the second largest search engine in the world in YouTube manipulate algorithmically the content that we get to see, the better off we're going to be. So please think about doing that. Consider doing that. Is that it? Are we wrapped with news?
I think that's it.
If we could put up the GoFundMe one more time, and if we could get those, it's in the document. You just got to copy it. Okay, I can go grab it real quick and share screen.
We are trying to, once again, if you don't know, get to Washington, D.C. Julian's trial is set to take place in September. We have about 4 months. I believe the count was 114 days today until Julian's next round of hearings. If we have 3 weeks, it's 3 weeks total of protests that we have to get planned. We're working with the same groups we allied with last time. We're getting new groups involved. But we need your help and assistance with this, because we're not AstroTurf. We're literally people on YouTube trying to get the word spread about what's happening. So if you have the ability to donate, please do so. If you can share it around, that would be awesome. We're going to be in the next probably week or so releasing a video specifically for the GoFundMe and updating all of that as well, to give you kind of a little rundown of events and what we have planned and who we're working with. So yeah, I mean, just keep waiting for updates on there and sharing it as often as you guys can. And also, if you're someone that is connected and working with some other activist organization, and you would like them to get involved, and you think that that group would be interested in working with us, we are interested in working with basically any group that's interested in working with us. So that would be awesome if people could help connect us with others throughout the activist community. We're also putting out all calls for organizers and activists to join us in building their local free Assange movements, but also joining us in DC as well.
So I put the link to the GoFundMe in the A4A chat and in the Slow News Day chat. Please, yeah, I can't stress this enough. I know how broke I am. and I can't, yeah, I can only imagine that is fairly consistent across the audience. So if you aren't in a position to where you can donate a few bucks, totally understand that. I'm not either. But please share the link and on every social media platform that you belong to. I really think that a tactical move for people in the Assange movement is to try to make these vigils blow up on platforms like Mastodon and Minds and Gab and MeWe and whatever else that is going on, as well as getting people over to platforms like Rockfin, BitChute, and DLive. Yeah, I think that's I think that's gonna do it for today. You want to go ahead and close us out, Andre?
Yeah. I appreciate everybody joining us. We were supposed to have Fiorella with the Convo Couch on today, but she did not have a chance to make it because she's not feeling well. So I hope you are feeling better and can join us some Tuesday or Saturday in the future. A big shout out to Tarek as well as Ian for hopping in here. It was about 4 a.m. when we started for Ian, so he is a true trooper. And I just want to thank everybody for watching. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange, or you can email us at info@action4Assange.com.
And my name is Steve Poikinen. If you aren't familiar with me, I host a show called Slow News Day. You can find it here on YouTube by typing Slow News Day Podcast into the search bar. I am also on DLive and Rockfin, occasionally Periscope, working on Mastodon and Library. That'll happen one of these days, I promise. I had Break Your Brain Week on my show. So if you haven't watched these, Monday, Whitney Webb. Tuesday, Vanessa Beeley. Wednesday, Danny Sherson, and Ryan from The Last American Vagabond. Thursday, I did a deep dive into the Sunrise Movement, which is one of those left-wing AstroTurf groups, with Robbie Yeager from the MCSC network. I also had a fantastic conversation with Alex from Red Star Radio, who will be on the Assange Vigil here coming up shortly. Thank you for being a part of this with us. We love you guys. We can't do any of this without your support, and you mean the fucking world to us. You really do. Thanks to Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s, setting up everything. I know you're fucking beat, bro. I'm sorry we dragged you out of bed for this. We but I'm dumb, so I can't do it myself. Thank you to Kimber, the Mean Panda, for making all the graphics. We are going to be releasing our teach-ins this week. Episode 1 will be available very, very shortly. We're going to do a series of these leading up to the second extradition round. I have meetings coming up with national organizers based in DC this week. We have plans, y'all, and we want you to be a part of it with us. We need you to be a part of it with us. So if you're not already activated, we're going to get you there. and I can't express how important it is to be in DC for all 3 weeks. That's why there's a large target amount on the GoFundMe. And if you break it down week by week, it's less than what we were trying to go for back in February. So yeah, again, please, if you can, donate. If you can't, share the link. We will see you Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central. And also Tuesday on my show, I'm going to be interviewing legendary hip hop artist R.A. the Rugged Man. It's true. I can't believe it. I'm stoked. So big things going on. Please be a part of it with us. Until we see you again, Commander X is on my show tomorrow. Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. Pacific. Can't forget that. He's bringing his lawyer. This is gonna be wild. We love you and good luck to us all.